Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm your host, Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a new guest of the show, Don Sawyer. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Tim. It's great to be here, and thanks for having me on. I really do appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you being here, Don. It's always great to chat with new people who are new to me anyway on the podcast because there's so many authors out there, there's so many books. Nobody can possibly read them all, and frankly, I just get exposed to way more interesting people than I have any right to be by being on this podcast.
No, it's a great gig. And, as you say, like I read a figure, it sounds almost unbelievable, but that there were 4 million books published last year alone. And so, trying to wade you through that is pretty difficult. But it's programs like yours that make it possible for authors to get their name out and their books recognized a little bit.
Yeah, I suppose. So, Don, what is your book about? Your latest one, say, if you've got more than one.
Well, I'm older than I look. That's a good thing, but you can't see me. But I've been writing for a long time. And my first book was, it was about my experiences teaching in a rural part of Newfoundland in 1970, 72. So I've been writing for a long time. And this latest book is a complete departure for me. It's an urban fantasy.
Ooh.
And it revolves around these magical gems. And the gems actually are made by a machine that extracts a portion of your soul and then crystallizes them into these magnificent stones, which magnify your character, your personality, your powers. And as we start off with the book, the gem maker is crystallizing, is creating a crystal for Barbara, who's trapped in a loveless marriage and a very in a sterile suburban environment, and she realizes that this guy is her ticket out, and so she tracks him down through the subways of New York, and she discovers that he's part of this utopian community that was built in the shell of an old station that was abandoned in 1873, which, by the way, is true, that part. And so these sort of various figures of power, of sort of occult and mystical powers, but also just kind of misfits, inferior people who have knowledge that has long been forgotten, have come to this community, this shell, and created a utopian community, and sort of anarcho-syndicalist community. And from this, they begin to realize that these gems that he makes aren't so benign. He's been prohibited. He's 110 years old, by the way, and he's kind of frozen in time. But he's prohibited from sharing his name with anyone, touching another person, and so she crashes in on his life. And then together they realize that this is something larger, and that there's an evil out there that's using these gems almost as influencers to promote this sort of Nietzschean idea of the Übermensch, of the idea that there's this ruling class that is meant to dominate, and so they start this quest to try to figure out who these guys are and how they can stop them. So there you go. In a nutshell.
That sounds really like a lot more interesting than a lot of urban fantasies that make the big time on Amazon that I always see in there. It's always like a werewolf or something. This is way different. And that sounds like fun. Yeah.
No, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I've decided there's kind of two divisions of urban fantasy, and I won't use names, but there's some that just, it's just all they've got is dragons and werewolves, in
vampires.
Yeah,
don't forget the vampires.
So what? And then there's another group, like, for example, The Night Circus. Do you know that book by Erin Morgenstern?
I've heard of it. I haven't read it. I want to. Yeah.
Beautiful book. And there, the magic is like just under your feet. And you don't, I don't know about you, but in my experience, the biggest monsters are human.
Yes.
And so And so, your monstrous figures don't have to be physically monstrous, but they're psychologically, mentally, socially monstrous. Although in the one case, one of mine is pretty monstrous, but that's beside the point. We're not even sure he's quite human. But anyhow, but I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm almost ashamed sometimes. Some of the stuff that they call urban fantasy. There's it's like, come on, why bother? It's just more of the same, but in a kind of a more or less contemporary urban setting. And what I like in this case is, I mean, I use the city, like the subway system, for example, the New York subway system. What is going on in the world is sort of my canvas. And so I think the best urban fantasy gives us a mirror to kind of look at ourselves and look at our society in, because it's just kind of a flip side, right? We're just looking at it from another perspective, and maybe it helps point out some of the blunders that we're making, and so at the same time, I hope it's not just a blatant metaphor. It's
Right.
also supposed to be a really a pretty rollicking adventure.
Yeah, I'm not really a huge fan of allegory in when I read fiction. I try to avoid writing it too. But the thing is, it's hard not to some extent. It's just if your allegory is specific enough. Like I've noticed this with my books. Whenever I write a book, it seems to be all the books I've finished anyway. I can look back at them and say, that's why I wrote it that way. Because I was going through that at that time, or shortly before or after it. I was experiencing something that I didn't know how to put into words, and then I put it into words in a book of fiction.
Yeah. I mean, how can it be otherwise? I mean, we write what we know. We write what we care about. That I think, I had an interview with someone who said, what's the most important thing about being a writer to you? I said, having a passion for what I'm writing. But what I have a passion about is things that matter to me. And a lot of those things do have to do with current events, with social justice, with good and evil, as Nietzsche had, beyond good and evil. And so I think that makes sense. I mean, like you say, if it's too heavy-handed, people are just going to toss it aside. But I don't think that. I think that it fuels a good narrative because there is substance to it. There is something people recognize in it. And in this case, I'm sort of drawing on this whole idea that as a species, we're literally facing existential challenges. And instead of dealing with these globally and as a species, we're falling back into smaller tribal groups, and those groups are being exploited for obvious reasons. And so this is part of this is like, well, let's make this literal. Let's these guys have powers beyond our comprehension, and they're using these powers to divide and to spread this propaganda that keeps us from finding ways to be together as a species and work collectively toward a resolution of these problems.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me also of the Gnostic tradition.
Okay.
It's like it's related to Christianity, but are you familiar with this at all?
Yeah, I know Gnosticism.
Okay.
But I'm curious how I'm
okay. So because in that tradition, the universe isn't real or whatever, right? I think this is the one. I'm not getting mixed up here. The universe is an illusion, more or less, created by evil beings to hold humanity in a kind of loop, or to keep humans and probably other beings. I'm not sure. I don't know that much about Gnosticism, but at least humans from discovering inner peace, more or less, discovering the truth that they are to, they can escape their physical forms and become something greater. And that's the part that reminds me of that is specifically there's the element of the archons, the creatures, the super beings that want to keep humanity kind of enslaved as their fuel, more or less. It's quite a good fantasy magic system if you don't believe it literally, because
that's right.
But if you look at the world as it is, there are definitely, you look at a billionaire, it's like that's hard to say that's not an archon in some way or shape or form that wants to just a physical version of an archon that just wants to keep us doing a certain thing so that they continue to be comfortable, basically, beyond comfortable even.
Profit. And I mean, when so again, I don't hit people over the head with this, but I
Mm-hmm.
think you can sort of see it, over the course of the book. By the way, there's a sequel to this book that's coming out in next year, next May,
Okay.
called "The Tunnels of Buddha," because it
Mm.
turns out that the Mester, sort of the center of this cabal of evil, is located. Well, he's actually located in London, but he originated in Budapest, Hungary. And
Mm.
so as they track him down, they traipse through the streets of Budapest, which I find one of the most moody cities in the world. And they go to a ruin bar, these old mansions that have been turned into bars, and so the magic and the reality, it kind of blends into one.
Mm-hmm.
And that idea of yeah, there's another. I should know it too. Mechanism. It was like the Cathars
Mm.
in southern France were part of that movement, and of course the church said no way, and so the first in the 12th century they slaughtered tens of thousands of Cathars in
Yeah.
a crusade. Because that's what you do. You can't let that idea, whatever it is, you can't let those ideas that, hey, maybe we can be free, you can't let them thrive, because then, there's the danger people might actually take advantage of it and do something. So also, I want to make a point that this utopian community is also a kind of a visible alternative where
Mm-hmm.
it's not perfect by any means, but there's people from all over the world working in with, as I say, an anarcho-syndicalist kind of arrangement,
Mm-hmm.
and so you can see how how people can work in harmony without bashing each other head and screwing each other and making a profit off of them. And of course, that whole thing is served by this ancient train that can only serves this particular stop
Mm.
deep under the New York subway station.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought back up the syndicalism, because
Yeah,
if anything, I'm pretty interested in syndicalism myself. Not
right.
necessarily in narco style, but whatever.
Well,
Can't
I
be
know.
too
I mean,
picky. Can't be too
yeah.
picky though when you're talking about a
Well,
better way of doing things. Yeah,
you can draw anarcho and talk about syndicalism, and then they mean much the same thing. Where
exactly. I mean,
owner, cooperatives, if you will,
mhm.
kind of. We can, yeah. I mean, it's that idea though that we don't have to have bosses, and the
Yes.
whole idea that you like, the largest really cooperative in the world is in the Basque Country, as you probably know, and they have over 80,000 people part of it. So I mean, these are alternatives. These are different ways of being in the world, and I guess that's kind of what I like to explore as well. I mean, I've worked all over the world. I've worked in West Africa for many years, and in the Caribbean. And it's really made me much more aware that there's lots of ways of being in the world, lots of ways of doing things, and ours is just one of them, and not necessarily the best. So to try to open people's minds to different ways of being, and being more open to those ways of others that maybe don't look like us or act like us, but their particular adaptation to their world isn't any less than ours. It's just different, and maybe we can learn
Absolutely.
something.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just a different approach seems more and more necessary these days. But that's the very serious, more political economic side of things. Whereas I mean, as a novelist myself, I mean, I write high fantasy, so I'm
Do you? Oh,
mostly, yeah,
look at,
huh?
I love high fantasy. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm writing one right now. It's going to be out shortly after this podcast episode airs, if I can finish the job, finish the final draft. But because I publish independently, it's such a bear to get, because everyone wants a series, and then with high fantasy, the books need to be longer, and there's this huge push just economically, because if I want to make money off these books, which I kind of do because I have to survive in some way or other, I need to make some money somehow in the current
Yeah.
system I live in, right? We all live in, more or less. Probably most people who are hearing this are going to live in this system. If not everybody. Just I don't want to exclude anyone, but the idea that there's no that there's no solution to writing beyond writing a bunch of different books when you're an independent is very frustrating. A bunch of books in a big series, right, is generally how they say you should do it.
Yeah.
And I've never been cut out for that. I'm trying to come to terms with it lately, and it's very difficult. But it relates to me. It's kind of similar to what we're talking about with the bigger systems, right? There's systems of
profit,
profit, and versus the cooperative systems.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that, and just like that, authors have their approach, but the approach has to work for you, or you can't. Like, I've tried to rapid release. I've tried writing books faster and smaller and bigger and longer and more, and it's like it just stresses me out so much that it makes it harder to write books, and less gets actually created, which I think is a shame. And
it really is, because
trying to figure it out. Yeah.
I mean, I've been very fortunate in that, writing, I've been an educator all my life. So I taught in a whole bunch of different capacities in university down to grade 8, from Newfoundland to West Africa. So that's been my bread and butter. And the writing, fortunately, has been, a significant sideline, but a sideline, because otherwise I would have started long ago.
Yeah.
You know as well as I do how hard, better than I do, how hard it is to make a living off your writing. I was at a conference up here. We have something called the Writers Union of Canada, and we were at a conference. And so these are like, the top writers in the country, and there must have been 200 or 300 of us in the main convention hall. And the speaker said, "I'd like to see the hands of all the people here who make their living writing fiction." And I swear to God, Tim, 7 or 8 hands went up.
Oh my gosh! And these are
it was
big names,
people,
right?
They do it otherwise. I mean, they teach, they're teachers,
of course.
But as far as actually making their money off selling fiction, it just, it's really, really hard.
Yeah.
And as you know, even the big 5, they push, a dozen writers who they know sell. And even if you link up with one of the big publishers now, you might only sell 5,000-6,000 copies of a book.
Right.
I was really spoiled. Like, my first book ended up, being a Canadian bestseller, and then I wrote a young adult novel that's got now 20,000 copies in print, which may not be all that impressive, but for Canada, that's not bad.
I'm pretty impressed. I've never been published traditionally, but I have. I've published 20 books.
Oh my God! No kidding.
And none of them have moved that many copies. So. That independently, of course. I have to do all the ads and the promo and everything. I published around 20 books, most of them novel length, but just not. I still haven't broken in. It's kind of like there's no promise there, because nobody is here just to help us, and the industry doesn't exist to help authors get discovered either. No part of it does. Yeah.
It's to monetize. I mean, that's it. I mean, it's to profit. I mean, look at, I mean, I'm just getting introduced to the vagaries of Amazon. And I mean, my God, every time you turn around, it's a charge. And of course, if you want to get, and you're certainly a welcome exception, but there's so many of these. If you go on and say, I want to promote my book. Oh yeah, we'll do this X, Y, and Z for $350.
Yes.
This much of that. I was really shocked when I realized that even some of what I had always thought were the most legitimate reviews, like Kirkus Review, they won't look at your book unless you pay them $450.
Exactly.
Well, who has that kind of money? And particularly a struggling indie author, or with a small press like I am. All of my publishing has been in Canada, so I've been very fortunate in that sense, because we actually have subsidies for writers. If your book gets into a library, for example, a public library, and then they have a way of compensating you for that, and so there are advantages. But I know how hard it is. I can imagine your frustration. I mean, I think I'd give up. So good for you.
I mean, it's been 7 years of publishing this way, and I feel like giving up a lot of the time. To be perfectly honest, I don't. I mean, I've had other jobs in the meantime, but I'm still.
Yeah, I'll bet.
But I struggle all the time because you constantly need to be making stuff, or you just disappear as an independent. So at my last job, I was working at UPS. I was packing cars, which was it was a ton of work. It was a part-time job, but I was so exhausted. I ended up falling behind on all my publishing plans while I worked there, which is why I had to move on from it. But there is so much just pressure on everybody in our society that it frustrates me to no end.
Yeah, no, and you're right. I mean, you're probably too young, but I can remember, when we were talking about, with all of this wonderful artificial intelligence, all of this new technology, and all of these new, it's just going to free up so much time for people. Like, all of these robots are going to do it all. But in fact, we're working more hours than we were 30 years ago. And the pressure to produce is even greater than it was. And so, again, it kind of goes back to what we're talking about in terms of this book. It's not so much the technology, but who's in charge of it and what it's used for.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's used to maximize profit, well, you can see how it's going to be used. But if it's used to maximize satisfaction of the people who are working, well, then it's going to be used quite differently. And so I mean, I think that's but we're also seeing the isolation of people. I think that's why people form into these tribes that we're seeing. As you know, we're being told that we're seeing an epidemic of loneliness across Canada and the United States, and because we're being isolated from one another, and so we look for these tribes, no matter how misguided they might be. And so if we don't, we feel isolated, like a writer writing on his own. There's not a much lonelier job.
No, there is not. I did that my whole 20s. My entire 20s was basically that, complete with sleep deprivation from some sleep apnea that I didn't realize I had till I was 29. And I also my encounter with loneliness was exacerbated by the fact that I had no money, obviously.
Hard to go and have fun and meet people.
Yeah, I mean, I worked as a ghostwriter for a while back then, and that was also horrendous because, frankly, any job where you're monetizing fiction skills is usually quite abusive in its own existence. That's my experience with it, anyway.
When you were ghostwriting for biographies, or
no, I wrote novels for people.
No kidding.
I did a few of them, but they were so horrifying. They were so bad, and it's one of those things that made me realize, like, I can't do this continuously because I can't just write anything and have fun doing it. I have to write stuff that I love, or I will not enjoy the process, and that will destroy the process.
It's soul crushing. I can see how. So when you were writing those novels for others, was it fee for service? I mean,
they paid me up front, and then their name went on the book, and I never even knew what the final book was called because I'm not allowed to tell anyone I wrote them.
Did they sell?
I don't know. I don't know what they're called. Any of them. I don't even know the titles of the final book. I only know the working title that they gave me. And then I signed an NDA, and I don't know if they sold or not. I imagine they didn't because some of the projects were canceled later, that sort of thing. But I was praised. I was given the pat on the head, right? The good job. Here's a few extra bucks, maybe occasionally.
A tip.
Yeah, a tip for a novel. Can you imagine?
A novel.
It took 2 months out of my life, and I've got a tip.
Oh, if you could write one in 2 months, man, more power to you.
Well, I can write it. I mean, to be honest, if I really love a book, I can write it in 2 weeks.
Up here, there's a publisher that has a 3-day novel competition.
Oh, really?
Wouldn't that be something, eh?
Well, one of my big influences is Michael Moorcock in the high fantasy realm.
Yeah.
Who mostly through the games that he inspired, Warhammer, that kind of stuff. His books greatly inspired a lot of the games I grew up with. And I only recently got around to reading his Elric books, but he would write those in 4 days each with the help of some stimulants, of course. No, they're shorter books. They're like 60,000 words each. But that's still a lot of words for 15,000 words a day.
Well, I mean, it's another world. Like writing that.
And that was back in the 60s or 70s, I think.
I hate to admit it, but this book and its sequel, I wrote them together. Actually, I wrote them as a single book and then decided it made more sense to break them into two.
Okay.
But it was 190,000 words by the time I was done. Well, you can imagine how many publishers were interested in that.
Right.
So that's why I cut it into two. So, but I've been working on this for 8 or 9 years. Not
continually, not exclusively.
But so it's, I mean, geez, it's a lot of work, and I don't think people realize that. And then, in this case, I was having some trouble with it, so I hired an editor. Well, you would be in a position to do that even if you wanted to. I mean, and a good editor deserves to be paid.
Exactly. That's where almost the budget for my books goes.
Well, absolutely. So do you hire editors as well?
I hire editors when I get a good deal on them, but I can't afford them most of the time.
Oh, I know. I hear you. In this case, she was wonderful. And I mean, she not only helped me write a better book, she helped me become a better writer. Mm-hmm. And I've worked with editors all my life, and literally a dozen books. And oftentimes when the editor is assigned to you by the publisher, it's almost an adversarial relationship.
Right.
You're trying to wreck my book. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. But they kind of have the upper hand. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hey, you don't like my editing? Fuck off. We'll take your book and shove it. This having hired someone to work with you was a whole different relationship.
Mm-hmm. It's actually very, very pleasant a lot of the time because very
pleasant.
The power the power dynamic is different, but also it's more. There's way more give and take. That's been my experience with it.
Absolutely, more give and take because she's not trying to wreck things. First of all, you got to trust your editor, right? Well, if someone's just assigned to you don't have any basis for it. I mean, in this case, I had looked at her work, I liked it. I'd seen what she had done. So I went in, with a positive attitude, and we really had a great time. And so, but I mean, even you talk about being self-published, but geez, even small independent publishers can't really afford editors anymore.
That's true.
It's all different.
Yeah, and I honestly, I've been relying on people who are kind of down, having trouble financially, and then the editor has a sale, and that's why I keep my eyes out for that kind of thing. I'm like, not only is it good to get help them out, they need the money, but they can give me a good deal on the work, and then I can actually afford it. So it's people trying to raise each other up from bad financial situations in general.
Yeah. The invisible hand of the marketplace.
Yeah, exactly. But unfortunately, the invisible hand is pretty uncaring too. I mean, it's the biggest problem. I mean, it's the greatest challenge that I've dealt with actually in writing fiction, because I used to write fiction, broad, sweeping science fiction and fantasy stories. I still do that. I mean, but and I used to imagine the world was run by people who made sense in their positions, who would be like, this is very good leader, or this is a great whatever, they're good at what they do. And the older I get, the more it becomes apparent to me that the people in power do not necessarily have that trait. They do not have the quality skills needed to do their job well. At least not the way it's currently organized. Anyway,
I think it's one of the great myths of our age is that there's someone in charge who knows what he's doing or she's doing.
Yeah.
And I mean, the more you meet these people, you say, shit, these people, mm-hmm. I mean, you can see through them so quickly. Yeah. And when you see the economic interest behind them, you say, oh, no wonder. I mean,
it's transparently grasping. Yeah. Go on.
And I mean, this is what I'm doing with these books, is to show how people can fight back. And we don't have to, we're convinced of our own inadequacy.
Yes.
I think that's a lot of what I don't know if you're familiar with Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil, but he said, and he draws on Plato and Aristotle and those guys. I mean, they were big fans of slavery and slaves and in Plato's Republic, he thinks that there should be a separate group of people called the Aristoi that are bred to rule. Mm-hmm. Like they procreate amongst themselves. They have their own schools and so forth and so on. And so these guys are not Democrats. They didn't
No.
like democracy at all. And so that belief in people's capacity had to be diminished. I mean, their own capacity had to be diminished. Otherwise, how did you justify this ruling elite? So I think we're all subject to that, to our own, to being convinced of our own inadequacies, of our own limitations, of someone else's superiority. Well, geez, he made a lot of money. He must know what he's doing. But we know that 50 to 75% of wealth in the United States is inherited. It's not earned.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even it's like, come on. We're just dealing with luck. Someone said that the biggest decision any person ever made was deciding who to be born to.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of truth to that. So let's quit pretending that there's this meritocracy.
Yeah.
And start looking at people with more equality, more compassion, more sense of, well, what do you have to contribute, and what do I have to contribute, and how together can we make the world a better place? Let's not leave it up to these elites who have very specific interests and that drive them. So anyway, well, I'm glad because it really does sort of fit into. Anybody's going to listen to hell. I'm not going to read that. It sounds like
but I'm sure the book's way more fun than this conversation has. This part of the conversation. I hope people are enjoying this conversation too. But I guess I'm just in a heavy mood lately.
No, I'm sorry. Look, call back. We'll talk about it later. Okay,
sure.
Tim?
Sure. So when it comes to writing books, I want to get back to my kind of bailiwick here. I mean, as much as I love talking about philosophy and politics and stuff, that's not what this podcast is normally about. So I want to ask you, so you've been writing for, 50 years. That's a pretty long time.
I don't really want to talk about it, but yeah, that's right. I think my first book, I can look it up. I think my first book was published in 1978.
Okay, so yeah, and I assume you were writing before that as well. I mean, like for a while, right? How long did it take you to get published when you started out?
I was lucky. Again, I mentioned, being in this little Newfoundland town, coming back, and I had a mentor who was a writer, and he said, "Man, you got to write this book," and I did. But in those days, I was writing it longhand, man. I was writing it on yellow legal pads, and the only person who could read my writing was my wife. So she, poor thing, had to type it out. And editing was a pain in the ass. But I did finally get it, and like I say, I sent it out to I had 2 rejections, I think, and I was feeling kind of down. Well, I knew I couldn't do this, and damn if the third, a major publisher in Canada picked it up.
Wow.
And it just, so I mean, I was really lucky. And then, as I say, to my amazement, first of all, to my amazement, it got published. And then to my utter amazement, it became a Canadian bestseller.
Yeah.
And then to my astonishment, it started to be used in teacher training programs all across the country. And I learned that, man, that's what you got to do. You got to get a book that's being used in a school.
Yeah. At risk of going back to the politics, Ayn Rand figured that one out. Gave away a bunch of books to schools, made it permanent.
I'm sure she did.
Unfortunately.
I'm sure she did.
I had to read a work in school, which made no sense in hindsight, but whatever.
Well, obviously that, again, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Who would support using Ayn Rand in public schools? I mean, as a library, sure. But to use it, I mean, come on.
A lot of people in the United States, it turns out.
Yeah, exactly. But who are those people? And what's their agenda? And how did they get into that influential position? And exactly what we're talking about. These things aren't as random.
No, it's very little happens at random. It's almost all. It's not deterministic either, though. Somebody makes a decision and it kind of echoes down the line.
Yeah,
but.
No. Absolutely.
But I wrote my first book when I was 14, so it's been. I've written 30 or 40 since then. But that's most of what I do. I mean.
But you sound like you enjoy the writing too.
I do. I had a harder time with it when I became an English major. So I'm just curious about your teaching, because you taught what kind of classes for the most part? I mean, you obviously went down to younger kids a little bit, right? But
I came to Canada and I went to University of British Columbia in modern Chinese history. Because my career path was to teach at the university level. What else are you going to do?
Yeah.
But the Chinese language really did me in. It's a very
I mean, I
difficult
don't blame
language.
you. That's a difficult language. Yeah. Especially for a native English speaker.
Exactly, tonal, and then of course I had to learn writing too. I mean, if I'm going to be an
Yep.
academic, I have to be able to read it. So of course, as you know, there's no correlation between the characters and
The
the
sounds.
spoken.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was very difficult, and anyway, I dropped out of the program, and what are you going to do as an academic? I mean, you never learned a real trade. You don't know how to lay bricks, or you don't know, how to, make furniture. So I started looking for a teaching job, and I just got more and more desperate as I worked my way across the country. And in those days, Newfoundland was very poor, and they only joined Canada in 1949, and they were so desperate that they hired me and my wife, and so that's kind of how I got into teaching, and then that led to the books, and as it's just been a really charmed publishing in many ways. I have a friend who can't get published. He's got a master's in creative writing. And one day he just got really angry at me. He said, "You've been spoiled. You got published right off."
Maybe a little bit, yeah. I mean, it's hard to say otherwise. Spoiled in maybe the best possible way, but still.
Yeah, but it's a funny business for sure. And I'm really, I really feel for you because it's as you've written so many books, and I mean. To have that sort of limited success, it must be very frustrating. I mean, and you said something earlier that I think is absolutely right. I mean, you write a book for a reason. I mean, unless you're doing ghostwriting, God forbid.
Yeah.
But, you write it because you want to say something. You want to, even if it's just entertain people, but if you want to share your world with them, if you want to provide another way of seeing things. I mean, those are all legitimate reasons to write, I think. And then if you don't have an audience, if you can't get the book out there, and if you can't get people to read it, then that's pretty frustrating. Someone asked me today about when I was doing an interview, like, what advice would you give young writers? And I'd say, first of all, particularly if you haven't, that know why you're writing, what you're writing for. Because if you think you're going to become a best-selling novelist, you're probably not going to be. I'm not saying don't try.
No, I understand. Yeah.
But be realistic about your expectations and what successes might look like to you. And maybe it's simply having some books that you want to distribute to your family, or what is it you're writing for? And I'm not saying that to you, but I think just generally, it's so hard. It's so fucking hard to, first of all, to get published. And if you do it on your own, and think of all the things you talked about, how difficult that is. I mean, all the publicity. I don't think people have any idea what's
It's
involved.
incredibly difficult. And being discovered these days is so. You said it yourself. 4 million books last year. Can you imagine trying to be picked out of a crowd of 4 million every day? Maybe. But the key there, at least that I've experienced, because I have had any success I've had has come from targeting a smaller group of people, in some sense, figuring out who will like the book, so make that crowd smaller, so there's fewer and fewer books that are competing with me, and more or less, and then kind of advertising in that direction. Even that is a crapshoot, right? And most of the time, my books don't move copies unless they give something away for free. It's very frustrating. Yeah.
And that becomes really complicated. I mean, looking at all these free giveaways, well, geez, I mean, wait a minute, you got to make some money somewhere along the road. You can't.
Exactly. And I've given away a few thousand copies of my books, but
I'm not
sold only a few hundred. So that's kind of, to put things in perspective, maybe I've sold 1,000 books, but I've given away 10,000 total across all of them. And it's kind of funny how I don't give away free copies all that often, but they're the ones that's the ones people try. And very few people want to spend money on an author, and it partially because of the squeeze that everybody's under. I'm not blaming the readers here.
Yeah. Well, they too are faced with this absolutely astonishing array of books. How do you
How do you
You know,
know which
unless
one is going to sing to you and be be awesome and what you need? Yeah, absolutely. And at risk of this just being a big old bitching session, I just
no, but
I'm really happy though that you understand where I'm coming from here. I mean, obviously it's good to sympathize with each other in this regard, or empathize. I'm not sure which it is.
I think it's just. I mean, this is for writers, right? I
Yes,
mean,
it
this is a
is.
anthology for writers. I mean, well, anybody who's listening here knows some of what we're talking about, but maybe not.
Absolutely.
You know, we're just offering different perspectives on
Mhm.
the same issue. And and your situation is, I think, more typical in some ways. I mean, as I say, I'm an educator first and a writer
Mhm.
second. And believe me, the education part is what paying the bills.
Right.
But so yours takes on a special. Uh, I guess it's very acute. It's very real. It's very immediate.
Hmm.
Uh, I mean, when I started going on to seeing how to try to market books in the 21st century, I was just flabbergasted.
It took me
And
years to figure that out, just how to do ads right. Yeah.
well, and then pay. Who do you pay? Who do you pay?
I
Do
pay
you give money?
Amazon. Just pay
Yeah,
Amazon, and they pay me back money sometimes when they feel like it. Is what it seems like. Sometimes
I
I
mean,
sell
so
a book.
those are the people who are making money off books.
Absolutely.
They monetize everything, every single thing. So you're bidding on a word, against other
It's
writers.
maddening. That is one of the
Matt,
worst. That's the worst part of my job right now. Is just bidding on words and figuring out, okay, which word can I get to charge? I mean, can I get charged less than 13 cents for this or 12 cents for this every time
crazy,
somebody clicks this?
crazy.
I mean,
I,
and then
I
that
just have.
adds up, and it costs money instead
Oh,
of
of course
making
it
money
does.
most of
Of
the
course
time
it
too.
does. I went on BookBub. You probably know BookBub,
Oh, yep,
um,
yep.
and I tried an ad with them. I misunderstood, but they have you bidding on words too.
Hmm.
So I wrote kind of a snarky little response back. Well, I just learned how not to spend $70 to promote my book. And to their credit, they arranged a phone call with me. I can just find out what I was complaining about. But I mean, I said, why are we bidding against other writers for a word so we can simply get to at um, the bottom of the page of your reel of
Your
your
newsletter,
real
yeah,
promotional, which people pay for
right.
after being and I mean, it's like this is strictly about profit, and don't tell me otherwise. And they kind of, well, yeah, but we want to buy, but I mean, okay, it's a business, all right, but as usual, it's the producer, it's the worker, it's the writer
Hmm.
who gets the
Gets the
they
shaft there, yeah. Gets worn
yeah.
down.
We're producing the product and they're selling it. Yeah. Anyway, it's a fascinating area, and I mean, the very first time I said, I looked up urban fantasy. I don't know if I think it's blog sites,
Hmm.
um, and there was like 1,000 of them. It's
Yep.
like, where do you even begin? And then you start wading through them, and yeah, we'll do a review for you for $35,
Right.
and
And so a lot of time they do not deliver is the other thing about sites and
at all. And what do you
Instagram
need?
and TikTok and all these places that wherever you go, there's going to be people who are advertising their services to you as an author. I get phone calls still about books that I had published years ago, 7 or 8 years ago. I still get phone calls saying, "We want to promote your book for whatever money,"
Hmm.
and
After,
and that's
mhm.
insane. I mean, who's still trying to grub money off of that book that's never sold a
Right.
copy, based practically?
Well, they saw it somewhere, picked it up.
Yep,
Yeah,
just a
it's
matter of
just
time. Yeah.
so it's really tough. I mean, like I say, and when I first started publishing my books, it was pretty straightforward. First of all, your publisher had a promotional, a
Hmm.
division. They actually went out on a book tour.
Imagine that.
Imagine that, and they actually purchased ads, and I mean, but in newspapers, right? Because people
Yeah.
actually, there were still book sections and even smaller daily papers, and my books got reviewed, like by the Vancouver Sun and the Toronto Globe and Mail, and so there was a system in place, and But now it just seems to kind of descended, I hate to use the term, but into anarchy as opposed to anarchism. But it's
Yeah.
kind of like, it's like the corporate, well, like we see in so many areas, that the corporate structure now totally dominates. Like I think I just saw the other day that now 50% of all books in America are sold on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So there goes the independent bookstore,
Right.
and just about any other source. So you're playing to that particular, which is now established almost. There's no competition really.
Right. And
So
if you're an independent author, sticking to your guns and saying I don't want to be exclusive with Amazon is usually going to be
yeah,
the death knell for a large number of readership, a large amount of readership. You will not get that Kindle Unlimited subscription. Those readers will never find your book
never find it.
unless you go exclusive with Amazon now, and there's so many of them. But as much as this has been a fascinating conversation, we should probably be winding down now. So,
Oh, okay.
Don,
Yes.
yeah, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been great. Where can people find your books, and what's the new one called? What's the new series called?
Well, I'm glad you asked about the series. The first book is called The Burning Gem. The second book is called The Tunnels of Buddha. And there's a third, you have to have three, right?
Yeah.
There's a third book that is at this point untitled, but might go by the title Underground. The second one, as I say, is out in next May. It can be purchased by our friends at Amazon, or you can buck the trend and order it from your local bookstore because it's being distributed, anywhere. And you can also look on my website, which is simply donsawyer.org, or you can, and that's where I have all my books and information and reviews on them. And then also my Facebook page. If you just look up Don Sawyer books, you'll find that, and that's where I try to keep things more up to date.
Well, fantastic. That's it's been awesome having you on, Don. And I promise, if you come back, I will be more positive. But no, but
Well, I hope you have more to be positive about. I mean, I think it's if you're doing something for authors, I think it's important. Everything's not just roses and sunshine. I mean, I think it's important for people to hear these conversations,
absolutely,
and maybe find some other options. I don't know what kind of what a author's cooperative might look like.
Oh wow!
But I mean, I've heard this, your story so many times from so many people, and as I say, for me, and I don't mean it's a hobby because it's not. I take it seriously. But I'm not dependent on it. And so it takes a lot of the pressure off, and I'm retired now, which really helps. And I have a pension, which really
that's all wonderful. Good on you for having. I mean, you did all the teaching work for so long. I mean, you deserve it, I'm sure. I'm just still struggling. Different times, different places, But
absolutely.
But I do want to say I do have a book coming out in September, on September 5th.
Okay.
It's called A Blade of Dust. It's kind of Egyptian style high fantasy, Egyptian inspired high fantasy. Kind of in the vein of authors like Joe Abercrombie, but also Guy Gabriel Kay. So I couldn't really decide. So I kind of wove those two together a little bit. So it's a pretty dark fantasy with a lot of like subtle magic and lots of beauty and strangeness to it as well, because I can't write books that don't have that stuff in it.
Good.
So yeah,
that's in my kind of book, A Blade of Dust. I'm gonna order it.
It's up for pre-order right now on it, only on Amazon, unfortunately, but
and it's pre-orderable.
Yes, it is, and unfortunately, that means I've got to get my keystering gear, or I'm never gonna, because I'm not sure if it's in publishing condition quite yet. I still have a couple weeks, but gotta get my button gear. So. Thank you so much, Don. It's been awesome.
Thank you, Tim. I really enjoyed it. Take care.
Take care of yourself as well. Have a good one. And to the listeners out there, thank you for listening. You can find more of this podcast on the Libsyn feed, because right now the website is kicking me from posting new episodes for some reason. So check out the Alive After Reading RSS feed. I'll be the link in the you'll found it here. This episode where you found it is where you can find more episodes. So thank you for listening, everybody. I'm on YouTube now, so you can find these episodes in audio format on YouTube. So if you want to listen there, perfect. And stay safe, everybody. I will talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.